Hello.
Hello, is this Duane?
This is Duane.
Hey, Duane, this is Dustin Wilmus from the 5 Count. How you doing?
Hi, Dustin. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. It's nice to speak with you.
Finally, I recognized your voice right away, though.
Oh, well, then you'll
We'd
really...
never be able to do obscene calls because we recognize your voice. So.
Yeah. If you recognize me, you'll be real excited to hear Ton.
Duane, how you doing?
Okay, how you doing?
I'm really good, man. I'm glad to have you on the line.
We're very excited. I'm very excited about this. Yeah. I'm looking forward to trying to schedule this for a while, so this is very cool.
Well, it's probably mostly my fault.
No, and I've been really busy. I've been insanely busy, so that's fine. This is perfect.
It's not my fault.
Yeah, it's not your fault, though.
It's you two's. That's the main thing to get across.
I was worried there for a second.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, let's get to it. You've got a new book, Prince.
That is true.
And the Purple Rain Era Studio Sessions, 1983 and 84. How did that start? How did you just woke up one day and decided, let's take this on, let's figure this out?
I used to work for a magazine called Uptown Magazine, which was a Prince magazine based in Sweden. And we did a book called The Vault, and I helped with a book called DMSR, which is Pierre Nilsson did a book, and that's the name of it, DMSR. And it was a really good book, but we did a lot of stuff, and I started talking about the studio sessions because I started researching them for our books. And I realized there's a whole story here to be told. And I'm a big fan of the Beatles, and the Beatles, they had a book called the Beatles Recording Sessions, or the Beatles Studio Sessions, I forget which one it's called. But I thought that was fascinating to be able to look through their years working in the studio and seeing what they did. And then other books like Hendrix book or the Monkees or Beach Boys, all these different books came out. And I thought, why hasn't anybody done one about Prince? And then I started thinking about the fact that he had such a long career, it'd almost be impossible to do the entire thing. And so I started just looking into a good part of his book, or his career, and realized 1983, 1984, which is when he was cresting with 1999, and then did the Purple Rain movie, Purple Rain soundtrack, but he also did stuff for The Time, Apollonia 6, Sheila E., The Family, some more Vanity 6 stuff, did a second Vanity 6 album, did stuff for Stevie Nicks, did stuff for the Bangles, Jeannie Easton. There's a lot of stuff that was done during that time, and some of the songs ended up being with George Clinton later on. So there's a lot of things he did, and I thought, this is a story. It's almost a crime that somebody's not telling this story. So that's where I went with this.
So how did you ever get started researching that stuff? I mean, obviously everyone kind of knows Prince was pretty closed off. Like he was very private. So how did you even go about getting into that?
Once I had the work orders, I went to Sunset Sound, the studio he recorded in Los Angeles, where he did most of his bigger albums, and started talking to the people, the owners and the engineers and stuff. And they said, all his work orders are here from all the dates he did. And I was like, really? And they asked me if I wanted to take a look at them. And I said, yeah. And they let me make copies of them. And that became sort of the skeleton to the book. And the rest of it was just me finding the rest of the skeleton, the skin and things like that, to cover that. And that comes from the interviews with all the people that were in the room. So what I did was I found between 40 and 50 people, because I'm working on several books beyond this just in case, that worked in the studio with him, singers and a lot of the members of the Revolution, members of the Time, members of the Family, members of Apollonia 6 and Vanity 6, and started talking to these people. And they told me these stories. They're amazing stories about being alone basically in the room with Prince while he was recording with Dove's Choir, while he was recording Purple Rain, while he was recording Raspberry Beret. And I started thinking, this is one hell of a book. The idea of having all the people that were there in the room talk about being in this room. I make documentaries for a living, and I always say that the best documentaries are documentaries that take you into a place that you are not allowed to go, an exclusive club or a cave somewhere that you'll never go to, the Taliban, whatever it is. Going into this thing, it makes it compelling. Being able to go into the studio with Prince at a time when everybody wanted to be in the studio with Prince, to me, made that a great story. And so the book is not just about the days he did certain things. It's about his life events that led into this, why he would record this, what was his mood during this, from everything I could tell. The people telling me this is where, he was upset at me that day, or we had a fight, or he was in a great mood, he just won an award, or whatever it was, and just telling that story and letting you realize that his lyrics are very autobiographical in a way we didn't even realize, because he is singing and performing about what he knows. And if he's in a good mood, you'll hear a great song. And if he's in a somber mood, you may hear something a little more melancholy. And if you hear he's in, on his Sundays, he often did religious songs. He did God or something like that. So it's kind of fun to hear what was involved. And again, this is recording Purple Rain, recording Around the World a Day. All this is within a 2-year period. And that, that's pretty outrageous for him to have like 7 or 8 albums of stuff, over 220 sessions in the studio for just, for 2 years. So I would love to have done more, and I hope to do more if this book does well, but it's, the man was always working. And that's the crazy thing, is he's constantly in the studio. And so trying to keep up with him, just as somebody who's writing about it, is tricky. I can't imagine what it was like keeping up with him if you're his friend or his coworker or whatever, or even Warner Brothers, trying to keep up with him. So, yeah.
Well, I read through the book, and I got to say, for Prince fans, or if you think maybe you're a Prince expert, a lot of stuff in here, it's very exhaustive. And, the font is small. It could have easily been like 1,000 pages, and it's just those 2 years. But, I learned a lot of stuff that I assumed I kind of had a general idea of. And, there's a lot of stuff in there you were able to find out that I don't think anyone else has really ever been privy to before.
Well, I hope that's the case. A lot of things, people gave stories to me that I hadn't heard. And to me, that was part of the fun, is finding these nuggets of things. And like I said, when you're talking to the people, I never worked with Prince. So what I had to do was rely on the people that were there. And often, many of these people had never been interviewed before. Most of the engineers had never been interviewed. And the crazy thing is, an engineer, by definition, is the person that's in the room with him the most. 16, 17, 18 hours a day. They're a half an hour before he gets there and half an hour after he leaves. The only time they leave is when he does vocals, because he would always ask everybody to leave the room. So this is, the engineers are people that really don't get noticed as much as I think they should, because of the work they do. The things that they came up with and the stories about his moods, or again, just like saying, he tried this version of the song and it didn't go anywhere. And there's many people that were saying, no, he did a second version of that like months later and it didn't work out. Or, that stuff is entertaining to me. And as a completist, when it comes to Prince, it's always fascinating to hear what not only what got released and why, but what didn't get released. And finding out that there's elements to his music that we're not familiar with. And I think that's something like that is fun, because we can always just put on the music and listen, but hearing about all the different stuff he didn't come out with, or that turned into other songs. The song "Sex Shooter" turned into a riff from that, turned into something. "She's Always in My Hair," or other things like that. And that to me is fun. Not only knowing the when and the who, but the why of why he did things. All those things work out well for me in my mind.
So you talk about all these people that you got this information from. Who really were you able to interview personally, and who kind of helped you out the most?
Wow. Geez, there's so many. Well, I interviewed, I'll tell you some of the people. I interviewed most of the Revolution: Lisa Coleman, Wendy, Melvoin, Matt Fink, Brown Mark, Wendy's twin sister Susanna, Albert Magnoli, who directed Purple Rain, Peggy McCreary, who was an engineer, Susan Rogers, who I think you guys have talked to, Alan Leeds, Eric Leeds, Jesse Johnson, Jill Jones, and then a lot of engineers, like I said, tons of engineers, and the musicians that play with them, string instruments, some people that have passed away, Claire Fisher, David Coleman, who is Lisa Coleman's brother, and all of them told me stories, again, that from their perspective. And you can only get the full story if you're hearing as many perspectives as possible, because if you just heard from one person, you're not going to necessarily hear the whole range. And part of the fun to me is hearing them go from, their perspective, and then once they leave the room, somebody else comes in the room and tells a different story. That's fascinating, because he would bring in Jill for a few hours to sing, and then he'd bring in Susanna for a few hours to sing, and then bring in Brenda for a few hours to sing. And hearing each one of their stories kind of makes it a bigger tapestry. You get a wider blanket of information, and that to me is part of fun. Because again, you can hear one person's story, but I hope this provides perspective, and at the same time honors each one of their stories, because sometimes they contradict. There's some people that told me one thing, and then either work orders or somebody else tells me another thing. I tried to put both sides of the story in there so that everybody's taken care of as much as possible. And it still ended up being a thick book, even when I tried to edit it. It's a thick book.
Well,
it's over 500 pages.
Yeah,
throw your back out.
And it's just a couple of years. I mean, that's the crazy thing, and all those players. It's great that you were able to get so many perspectives. And Ton and I had a couple interviews. I know that you used some things from, and we had.
Yes.
We were flattered that you chose to use some of that. I know when you contacted me and you said, "Hey, I have this book about Prince," and I said, "Oh, we do this Prince Miss thing every year," and you're like, "Yeah, duh, I know."
I definitely know. You guys are well known. I mean, I sought you out. And I think that you're credited in the book, as far as I remember, in certain parts for the. Because I think I used stuff from you guys for, as I recall. I mean, I have to look and see exactly, but I think I used stuff from you guys for. I think you did Susan Rogers, and did you did? I know you did some other things. I'm trying to remember exactly what I did, but I remember thinking I have to reach out to these guys because you guys do a lot of great stuff. Definitely worth hearing. I mean, I think people don't understand how much work gets done by people like you guys out there to keep Prince's legacy alive, and I think that's really vital.
Well, and this was such an interesting time for him. It seems like Purple Rain, he was purposely trying to attract a larger audience and kind of get the kind of the lame white folks, I guess you could say, which seems like the exact opposite of what Prince would do later on. So it's interesting that he, kind of went into that realm and decided maybe it wasn't for him and backed off, obviously, with the next album so quickly. So it's definitely an interesting time.
Well, I think that he was, I mean, to me, he was an artist that was always searching for the next thing and not getting bored. And so he would tell everybody he was going to go right and fake right and go left, and he did that a lot. And part of the fun to me is, as a fan, is never really knowing and knowing that within 3 or 4 years you're going from 1999 to Parade and the Sign of the Times, and you've got several albums in there, one a year basically, except for the gap between 1999 and Purple Rain. But you have pretty much one a year, and each one is very different. One is very much. Purple Rain is very much a more rock thing at times, very guitar heavy, and then Around the World in a Day is very much a pop album at times. Raspberry Beret and Pop Life are very poppy, and then you've got more sparse stuff, a little more funky with Parade, and then you've got Sign of the Times, which kind of throws them all in a blender. So yeah, I part of the fun, and each tour is different. That's the other fun thing, is each tour is different. And I talk about the tours to a certain extent on here, is because he played in these 2 years alone, not on top of all those albums he did and the music he did. He did a movie, he did 2 tours, he was on stage at least 100 times over the course of this 2-year period. And again, 100 times, 220-plus sessions, a movie, and editing of the movie, rehearsals for the tour. This is just, that's a busy time. And that's just what he did. He was, 24, 25, 26 years old. That's, what kind of confidence do you have to be able to do that? That's just, for me, that's just crazy.
Definitely. Well, it's interesting. A lot of times it seems like Prince kind of did himself more financial harm than good because of the way that he was. And, you mentioned the tour. It seemed like he was sick of Purple Rain before he even started the tour. I mean, do you think maybe he would have been more successful, maybe on a Michael Jackson sort of level if he'd, I guess, did things the traditional way with the labels and, put the singles out there and wasn't so quick to just move on like he was?
Well, let me think. I mean, to me, I think that I don't know if he ever would have been like a Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson and first of all, I don't think it's possible for him to do that because Michael Jackson took a year or two to record an album. And it was a big master plan. I don't think Prince had a master plan when it came to this stuff. He recorded until he felt he had a theme and just said, I want this out now. And I was thinking today even how he ended the Purple Rain tour right at the time when Around the World was coming out, Around the World Day is coming out. I just realized today he could have easily continued the tour and just made it the Around the World a Day tour, and just kept going. But I think he was burned out and fried and just did not have the ability to keep doing that. Because Purple Rain Tour was the biggest tour of the year, basically. I mean, you had the Jacksons doing their Victory Tour, but really Purple Rain was about as big as you got that year. And so I can imagine that's going to be draining on every level. And, yeah, he was tired of it from everything I've heard. A lot of the music he's playing for the tour, he'd written some of it years earlier. So not only was he playing it over and over and over in a very structured way, which has got to be claustrophobic, he had to do the same thing every night because of lighting and timing and rehearsal. And then on top of that, to not be able to do new stuff very much, I think he felt like he was in a cage and not allowed to get out. And so he thought, you know what, I want to get this next album out even before we're done promoting Purple Rain. I want the next album because that's where I am today. And I think Michael Jackson, I don't think, was worried about how people saw him that day. And I think Prince was concerned that if he recorded something on Tuesday, he wanted it out Wednesday because he thought, I want people to know where I am at this moment.
Sure.
And I don't think Michael Jackson had the same thing. And I think Michael Jackson was a bit of a perfectionist. And I don't know if Prince necessarily was a perfectionist. I think he was into the groove and the emotion and the feeling behind it. But I don't know if he was a perfectionist necessarily about the songs.
Well, you mentioned earlier about all the kind of side project stuff he was doing and involved with, the Time, Vanity Six, the Family, and all that, and some of them, even toured with them and everything. Was it hard to kind of confirm details about those other groups, considering kind of how secretive he was even about his involvement at the time?
Yeah, I think that he was trying to. From everything I understood, he wanted to make sure he kept them secret. But he dropped enough hints that you could hear him on certain tracks and things like that. But they always made up a new. The producer was Jamie Starr or things like that. But yeah, everything was him. And I think that he just, even when he did interviews, they would he'd tell everybody, Morris, you got to say there's a Jamie Starr, okay? And so all of them would do that, and all of them were involved in this big charade of sorts that he wasn't the mastermind behind all this. And it was explained to me, it's funny, David Z., who's one of the engineers and some producers that worked with him, explained something very well to me. He said, we're talking about how why he would do that. He'd credit other people with his songs and not use his real name. And he said the reason why he did something like that is he wanted it to seem like an army. Because normally it would seem like one person. If one person's doing all that, it just looks like one guy doing this. And you don't think about it as much. But when you see that there's 20 people that write these songs, all of a sudden you're thinking, holy cow, there's actually a movement, a wave going on. And I think that is more impressive than one guy. And I think he sort of saw that and thought, how can I make this seem bigger than it is and artificially increase the attention by making it seem like more people are involved in this, when actually it was almost always him. I mean, he would have other people help write songs and things like this. Dez wrote part of Cool and a few other things, and Wendy and Lisa did a lot of stuff, and Bobby and Matt and everybody contributed to certain things. But for the most part, it was almost always Prince. And I think that to hide that a little bit made a little sense because he didn't want people to just be thinking, oh, another Prince thing, whereas now they can think of it as, oh, there's a Madhouse album, oh, there's a Family album, oh, there's a Sheila album, and not quite know. And so they're maybe more accepting. But I think the only people that really knew for sure were the people at the bank, who were cashing his checks that were a little larger than normal because he had all these bands. And good for him. I mean, if you got that much, you have that much in you, and you want to get it out, that's, fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, like they said, if you could go in the studio and record like that and come out with a When Doves Cry, wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you go in the studio every day and try to get another When Doves Cry or another Beautiful Ones or another Raspberry Beret? Yeah. That you would. And if you had people that said you can only release one album, wouldn't you find other bands that you could release albums under? And they say, oh, okay, well, I'll be a girl group then, and I'll make Vanity Six albums, or I'll be a Latin drummer, and I'll release Sheila's album, or I'll be a funk thing and release The Time. To have those sort of outlets, it's that's pretty cool. especially if you're a fan.
Yeah, for sure. I know, as a fan, I wanted to ask, obviously the book covers the Purple Rain period, and that's the period when most casual Prince fans know his stuff. But
Right.
can you, I guess, point to an era that you would say is your personal favorite? Is it the Purple Rain years, or is it something else?
Good question. I am a big fan of everything from probably 1981, which is Controversy era, to Love Sexy. That's in 88. That's really my big stuff. But I would say Sign of the Times is a huge one for me. I love the Sign of the Times band. I love the fact that I don't love the fact that he broke up the Revolution, because I love the Revolution. But what he did after that was created a whole new band. And if you've seen the Sign of the Times film or any things from that, you just see, wow, this guy's just full of energy. And he did it completely different than anything he'd done before. I happen to like Sign of the Times a lot as a double album. I like 1999 a lot. It's also one of my favorites. I think if I got to write a second book, which I don't know if your question is leading to that.
It was.
I would either pick 81, 82, which is Controversy 1999 period. It's the period right before the book I wrote. Or I pick 85, 86, which would be Under the Cherry Moon, Madhouse, Sign of the Times, Crystal Ball, The Flesh, Sheila's second, I think, third album. And there's a lot of stuff in there I would possibly pick too. So I don't know. I mean, I like them both. I like the 80s. Maybe because that's my time. I grew up in that era, and so I was getting to see his career, like a lot of us, getting to see his career happen in real time. And maybe because I have a lot of good memories about 85, 86. That's why I'm partial to it, because we all associate music with good times or bad times in our life, and that's a good time for me. So I would say probably the Sign of the Times era would be my favorite. I do like other. I mean, to say I don't like other stuff, I have to admit, you'll find pockets of everything he did. Something I like. I mean, I'll find something on an album every time that he did, and sometimes I'm in sync with what he was doing, and sometimes I'm completely out of sync with what he was doing. But there's always something there that's of at least interest to me.
Yeah, that's one of the things about his career. I mean, so many different styles and themes, and kind of in the 90s, especially with the new power generation, and he got into kind of the new Jack thing. That was probably my least favorite part of his. But he was trying to do new things, I guess, and he seems like a guy who probably didn't care what you thought about it.
It's funny because there's times I think that's the case, and there's other times that I think he's very concerned with what you thought, because he did want to sell. He did want to make sure people were interested in his music. He did want to make sure that people were buying his music, but at the same time, I think there was a part of him that wanted to see how far he could stretch the issue, and how far he could say, you know what, you like that, now I'm going to try something even weirder, and he'll do Bat Dance or something like that, and you're going, okay, well, that's a little more out there than I thought, and I think as an artist, he enjoyed that, but I think you're right, he probably was creatively saying, if you're going to follow me, cool, and if you're not, I'll catch up to you in the next album after that. I don't, but I think that there was a certain amount of things he wanted. Of course, you want to have sales because you got to keep the lights on. But at the same time, I think that he, as an artist, wanted to do what he wanted to do, and would be influenced by wherever he was. And if he was hearing Claire Fisher's stuff, all of a sudden he'd say, you know what, I'm going to not just going to use him on the family stuff. I'm going to use him on my album because I like that so much. And he takes him in a different place, and Sheila's music takes him in a different place, and Eric Leeds takes him in a different place, and I think that he was good about taking influences in a way, and that would be another one of not as concerned with what he was doing. I think at times he would listen to somebody like an Eric Leeds or something like that and say, wow, you're taking me in a different direction, and I'm not as concerned about ownership of that. I just want to make sure I make that part of my stuff.
So, as you mentioned before, and obviously anyone listening to the show here knows, we've interviewed a fair amount of people who have been associated with Prince, and we've interviewed a lot of them while Prince was still alive,
right,
and less after he has passed. Do you think in your interviews here now, I know we've noticed it seems like a lot of the people are still were very reserved when talking about Prince while
Sure.
he was still alive. Do you think you could get the same amount of information out of these people when he was still alive as you did now?
I would say 90% of the interviews I did were when he was still alive. I finished the book before he died. the book was done a month before he died. After he died, I went back to some of the people again and got more information, but I had done, I'd say 90% of the stuff. So the quotes in the book are from people, for the most part, that were done before Prince passed. Long before, some of them long before, because I was talking to people started the book in like 1994, to give you an idea of how long I've been working on this. And so all the quotes from these people, they were talking, or most of the quotes are talking about Prince in the current state. They're saying he is profound, he is, this, because he was alive when he was saying that. I didn't go back and change anyone's quote to reflect that he had passed, because what they were saying was a snapshot of that time. The only thing I went back and changed is my own words. So I went back and said, okay, I can't say Prince is, when I'm talking about him in my own words, I had to say Prince was. But I think you're right, Prince people are a little more open. But at the same time, I'll tell you, there's 2 or 3 people that I was going to interview that I did interview that said, you know what, now that he's passed, I don't want to speak publicly about him because he's my friend, and I love him dearly, and I don't want to make a public statement yet. And I respected that. I thought, you know what, that's completely fair. Because we go into this as fans. I'm a fan, but I didn't know Prince. I never worked with him. So I can only imagine the pain that a lot of these people felt. And if they'd asked me to take their quotes out of the book, of course I'll do that. That's fair. This, I don't want anybody to feel like they're being, manipulated or tricked to put in a quote into a book. It's just a book, and this is their life. And that to me is important. And so I definitely did that. But yeah, there's a lot of people that came out a little more information, and I don't know if I could have gotten most of the Revolution to talk about this stuff before. And I interviewed Wendy and Lisa very late in the process. I was delivering the book on like a Monday or Tuesday, and the week before was told that Wendy and Lisa would speak to me. And so I did an interview with both of them and was scrambling that whole weekend to fit their quotes into the book to make sure it worked. And it did. And they were great. And the things they both said were just fantastic and very insightful. And I'd had quotes from them from other things, too. And they were pretty brave about the things they said. But there's other people that were just not quite as ready to talk. And you're right, after he passed, I think people were less afraid of him being litigious or whatnot. But the bottom line is, to me, everybody talking is trying to tell the truth. And that's the thing that they all have in common, is they're trying to get the truth out there, because what that is our mission, everybody's mission right now, because Prince is gone and he can't tell his story anymore. So it's our responsibility to make sure that the legacy of him goes to the next generation. And the best way to do that is to tell his full story. And there's going to be good days and bad days. I think on the whole, it's good stuff in anybody's story, but there's going to be times that he had fights with people or things they didn't get along or that he was conflicted. And great art comes from conflict. So you're going to have that, but I think that it's everybody's responsibility to tell the truth as much as possible and get the bigger picture out there, because right now everybody just wants to know how he did what he did. How did the magician do his tricks? And I think that's something that's really good is how open and shockingly open people were with me. I think maybe because they knew I was doing a different type of book. This is about his studio sessions and about what was involved with the creative process. And so I had people like Questlove, who, not necessarily a Prince protege, but he's a Prince scholar, who heard about this and said, yeah, I would love to write a foreword for you. And, things like that. And getting somebody like Questlove attached as doing the foreword, that's crazy. Who am I to get Questlove attached? Or who am I to get, the Revolution or members of the Time to talk to me? I'm just some fan who happened to figure out a cool way to tell a story. Oh, it's the coolest thing ever to me. I mean, I have to admit, I had such a blast writing this thing. And hearing people's reactions after they've read it to me is the most fun, because when I wrote it, you write it in a vacuum. You're sitting in an office writing by yourself thinking, God, I hope people enjoy this. And then to find out that, yeah, they did, makes it pretty cool.
Well, we feel the same way. When we get these guys on the phone, it's like, holy crap, how do we score that? So you're not from Minnesota, is that right?
No, I'm actually from Maryland, and once I realized I was free to leave, I left, and I moved to Los Angeles. I live in Los Angeles right now.
So it's pretty cool that that you're even such a serious fan. I mean, obviously, Prince is well known, probably worldwide, but we still seem to get kickback even in our own state. Like it seems like I've met many people where I'm like, yeah, Prince, totally awesome, right? And they're like, nah. And I'm like, how do you, what? Like you live in Minnesota. Like, how are you not on the bandwagon? Do you ever kind of feel that way, or when you're talking to people or anything?
Well, here's a little background on me. My family, my dad's side of the family's from Minnesota. They're from Winona and Rushford, about 3 hours south of Minnesota. And I've never talked to any of them about this, but I can tell you they're all excited about the book. Maybe it's because it's their cousin doing it, but I think that there is a bit of a meh in Minneapolis at times. And I've had members of the Times say this, and members of everybody else say, you know what, there wasn't the respect that Prince had worldwide because he was a small-town guy and things like that. But I think that he had so much love for Minneapolis, and to build his Paisley Park up there, he could have easily built a Paisley Park out in Los Angeles. But to do it up there, and you know how far Chanhassen is from the city, that's crazy to go all the way out there. But he realized, you know what, this is, like they say, it's so cold it keeps the bad guys out. And, but you're right, there is a shocking lack of respect, with the exception of during the celebration time, but that's when everybody else comes into town. The locals don't always have the respect. There are always going to be Prince fans, and I'm not saying everybody, because trust me, some of the biggest Prince fans I know, like my friend Scott, who helped with the book, he has been a fan of his since 81, and so there is a core of people that do that, but there is a casualness about it. And also in Los Angeles, there's a certain casualness. I'm actually surprised at times when we're like, yeah, people are like, yeah, but I go elsewhere and there's rabid fans out there. As you know, I mean, when Prince passed, you don't get somebody passing and you don't get the Niagara Falls turning purple for just anybody, or yeah. Eiffel Tower or whatever it is, they color purple lights, unless, you realize that it's a big thing. And I didn't know, I have to be honest, when Prince passed, I didn't realize how well-liked and loved he was until I saw the world reaction to him. I felt like, oh, they're like me. They loved him and related to him. And I kind of thought I was like in a little bit of a cult for a long time, because people were like, oh, you like Prince? That's great. Yeah, I like Purple Rain. And you're like, but there's so much more.
Yeah.
Trying to explain that to some people.
It's a really interesting point that you make, because I felt the same way, and I felt myself almost taking it like I was ready to take it personally if the world didn't do something. You know what I mean? Like if the Eiffel Tower didn't turn purple, I was going to be like, you people don't get it.
You don't get it.
Yeah, I was like ready to.
I think the thing I found is the thing that makes Prince fans something special is I think they all have a very intimate relationship with him. And I don't know why that is, other than he's found a way to bring you aboard. And when he's up there playing, he's playing to you. He's singing to you, and you're listening to this stuff on headphones, and you're going, this is eliciting mood swings in me. This is, when I'm sad, there's a great sad song. When I'm happy, there's a happy song. And as artists, a lot of us look at him and think, oh, I could be like that. I would love to be like that. He hasn't, like you kind of implied. I don't know whether he cared. Maybe he did have an F.U. attitude. I don't know. But he seemed to. I mean, look at the way he dressed. He'd show his butt off. So I think that there's a certain amount of, how can I shock, but how can I do something that's going to get attention? But, man, all the people that like him really do have an intimate connection with him. And I think so that when he passed, more so than a lot of other artists, you go through the stages of mourning. I mean, a lot of people I know are still processing this. A year and a half, almost 2 years later, that they're still trying to go, I'm still in the denial stage, and it's like a loved one passed, and that's a big deal. That's a real big deal. And I get it. I was a huge Bowie fan, and I went through a pretty bad sad thing when that happened last year. And then the 1-2 punch of Prince right after that is like, that was a tough time. But the Prince thing, for most people that are big fans, it's painful. It's actually painful to people. And I know people I talk to that still tear up when they talk about it. They didn't know the guy, but they felt like they did because they felt like his songs spoke to them on a level in their heart, spiritually, whatever it is, that is almost undeniable. And like you said, I would have been a little bit upset if the world didn't honor him with the purple, lights on everything. And I almost feel like it didn't last long enough, And I look at the way the world reacted after he died compared to after Michael Jackson died. And Michael Jackson, it was sad, but they always look at him going, well, he was always, kind of a little off there. But Prince passing was so shocking to all of us because, we all thought he was this healthy guy, vegan, and, he didn't stay outside. He stayed in Minneapolis, seemed to be healthy, seemed to be, on his game. And then to find out, nope, we were lied to. And that just blew our minds. I never thought that Prince and Elvis would have something in common like that,
Yeah.
I think that's what made it even harder for us because, no, that's not the story we knew. That's not the story we knew. So, yeah, that's where I went with that.
Well, I guess if there is maybe a silver lining, it's that we're seeing, a lot of these unreleased songs coming out. And, a lot of them you cover in the book when he was recording them. And,
Sure.
it's interesting, around here, Paisley Park is kind of seen as, this Mecca, even though a lot of these songs weren't recorded there. But, I know people were up in arms that they took the stuff out and, now it's getting cleaned up and you find out some of it's damaged. And, it's really kind of turned this whole thing into a kind of a weird firestorm in a way.
I think that, I personally, I wasn't sure how to think when I heard the music got taken out of there. And I can understand why people would feel hurt, but I think it's nostalgia that makes them want to keep it there. Not necessarily that it's a great place to keep things. It happens to be where they were, stored. But they were stored in big closets. They weren't necessarily stored in given the proper respect. And, that some would have water damage and some would just be aged. So to me, it almost feel like I wish if he had taken more care of it, there wouldn't have been this conflict. People said, oh, great, all the stuff is there, we're good. But I think they looked at it and said, these are assets, these are pieces of his future, this is, and history, these should be taken care of properly. And so they went to a place out here in Los Angeles, and I think that was very smart to have them come out here to Los Angeles because they can be given the proper care, and they can be given the proper respect they deserve, and treated properly and digitized and archived and logged, and then maybe get on deluxe versions of albums or collections or whatever the family decides to do with the music. You hope that there's a big master plan for this stuff, and you hope that somebody behind the scenes is kind of prepping all this stuff. But I'm kind of happy that they're doing something with this instead of just letting it sit in a closet, a locked closet, but a closet nonetheless in Minneapolis. And I'm sad that it had to come to this, but Paisley Park is not the place it was. Paisley Park is now a tourist place, and maybe this stuff can go back there, but it should be archived properly somewhere with the proper care and the machines that are necessary and the tools and the technology, which I don't think are there. I don't think Prince kept up on this technology. And once he was done with it, he got done with it. Well, there's 16-track recording studio in these things that were recorded in the early 80s or 70s even. Well, they need to have a proper machine that can play that stuff. And I don't think they had that anymore at Paisley. But I do get it. I get it why people would be upset. I totally get it. But I'm hoping that they have the right intention on all this stuff.
Well, again, the book Prince and the Purple Rain Era studio sessions out now. And, now that you've gotten the book out and kind of get a general idea of, how you're going to put them together, do you think another one will be not too far down the road?
I would love that. I would love it. And so far the reaction's been really good. People seem to be enjoying it. It's on Amazon, and there was some things trying to get it out the first 2 or 3 weeks. It wasn't coming out on Amazon, and people were getting frustrated, and trust me, I spent 20 years waiting for this thing to come out, and I was frustrated. But the guys that have been working on it behind the scenes with me, Thomas and Scott, Yost, Cam, and Craig, these are all guys that I talk about in the book. These are the guys that I bounce things off, and we've been talking about what to do for the next book for a while, if I get to do one. And I'm hoping I get to either do 81, 82, or 85, 86, but it depends on how well the book does. If the book, these books are not only time-consuming, because they really are, because you want to make sure you get everything right. And I probably didn't get every detail right. I got most of it right, 95, 96, 97%. But there's always going to be a few minor things in there that I would like to fix on a future edition of this. But they're time-consuming, but they're also financially consuming. It was, travel to go interview people. I flew to Boston to interview Susan Rogers, or taking the people out for dinner that I have to interview, transcriptions of hundreds of hours of things, legal fees, art fees, going to Minneapolis, dealing with stuff up there for interviews. So it does get very pricey, and books don't make a lot of money. So it's difficult to justify to my wife and daughter why Daddy's going to be, working every night and every weekend and every holiday for something we're losing money on. And I'm not doing it necessarily to make money, but I'm not doing it to lose money either. I would love to. Sure. It would be great to be able to support myself and keep doing these. I hope to. I really do, because honestly, it's one of the most fun things I've ever done in my life. I got to work several years ago. I worked on a thing called the Family Jam Show, where I got to meet the Revolution. I was up on stage with them, and Jill Jones was there, and the family performed. And I was backstage, and I did all the rehearsals, and that was fun. This is just as much fun because I'm getting to now take the relationships that I have with these people and the interviews I've done with them and find a way to tell their story in a way that honors their contributions and music history. So yeah, to me, if I could spend the next 20 years doing additional books, I would be happy to call you every 2 years and do another interview and keep going. If there's interest in it, I think there might be. I would love that. It depends on how they're receptive to the book. That's the big thing. So that's why I was flattered and honored that you guys want to have me on your show, because first off, like I said, I thoroughly enjoy your show, and like I said, you guys are mentioned in the book, and it's, to me, you guys are so vital when it comes to keeping his stuff alive, and whether it's people you interview or talking about him or the Prince myths, those kind of things are really important, and I don't think that that gets said enough. So I want to make sure you guys knew I'm a big fan of you guys, and so I've been looking forward to this for weeks, months, really. Now that I think about it.
Well, thank you very much. We're glad that we were able to have a teeny tiny a part in the book. So if you need anything from us, definitely let us know, and we'd be glad to help you on the next one.
Absolutely, I would love that. I mean, like I said, I go through the interviews you guys have done and things like that, and if I find, sometimes you'll interview somebody that I've already interviewed, but what happens is you guys got a better quote, and I'm like, I don't care where the quote came from. If it's good information, it's good information. I'm gonna, but I made sure every time I use somebody's quote or somebody's from a podcast or a radio show or an interview or a magazine article or book, I try to cite everything. So there's like 30, 40, 50 pages of citations in the book, and because I want to make sure that you guys are properly credited for when you did things, because that to me is really important. I don't think that gets enough say. You guys deserve to have that kind of recognition. But that's so that's I think I'm trying to think. You guys did an interview. You did Brown Mark, right?
Yep, a few years ago we did.
Yeah, it's a Brown Mark. I think you guys talked to Bobby and Andre, as I recall. Mm-hmm. A couple of people. I'm trying to remember all the different ones you talked to, and Dr. Fink, I think you talked to. Mm-hmm. So I definitely, I think I'm almost positive you guys can look through the thing and find 6, 7, 8 times you guys are mentioned. I should put stars and flashing lights around you.
Well, it's exciting to be part of a works cited page. That's like a peak for us, I think. To be part of a reference.
You guys should aim
page.
higher, really, I think. You guys should aim a lot higher than that. We got mentioned in the back of a book. I can retire. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so anyway, if anything that any sort of attention the book gets does help, because I really want to do more of these things. And so far, the people's reaction has been really positive, and people have been writing to me. I had somebody write to me today and said that in the first 50 pages, they cried twice. And I wasn't trying to make anybody cry, but they teared up because there's this emotional connection to people. I think knowing what he was doing is a link to him, and we don't have him anymore. So it's our job to keep him alive. And if it's talking about him like this, interviewing people that were there before, because as we find when Prince passed, he passed way too early. And so anybody can just kind of pass on in the middle of a conversation, I don't think Prince's story was told completely yet. I don't think it was done.
Right.
And now it's our responsibility to go back and analyze what he did so we can give that respect to the next generation and generations beyond, because people should know about how important and vital he was and how he changed music and how literally there's nobody like him. And you can say this guy's the next Prince or whatever. No, nobody is the next Prince, period. There's not a next Elvis. There's not a next Prince. There's not. And that's something that we all have to deal with. So the man deserves our respect, our attention, and a solid study of what he did, using the people's knowledge that were there, because the people that were there are our first connection to him. And it's story one removed. We're never going to get the full story from him, so let's get it from the people that were there, because they've got the stories to tell, and they know these things, and they tell it with love. They tell it with respect, and every one of them I talked to said, this man worked harder than anybody, so it really upped your game. If you knew your boss was going to be there at 10 in the morning and work until 5 in the morning, you didn't complain if you stayed till 8. You're like, oh, look at that guy. 20 hours out of the day. I want to leave at 12. So there's a respect for this guy that he worked harder than anybody and practiced more than anybody. And if you were in the studio with him, he could take your instrument and go, this is how you'd play it. And you go, okay, sir, you win. Because you don't get that good by not practicing, by not working at it. You get that good because you work at it and because you make sure you get it right. And again, maybe not a perfectionist when it comes to certain songs, but the man practiced and practiced and practiced his instrument as much as he could. And that's why when he plays the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you watch him and you go, oh, wow, that's why he's Prince. That's why he can throw his guitar in the air, and that's why he can strut off. And on top of that, he was always cool. You didn't see him doing stuff. You saw him strutting off. You didn't see him stumble. You didn't see him trying to, take a drink out of a cup and not hitting the straw, and catching it with his tongue. No, you never saw him doing that stuff. He was just cool. And on top of that, every celebrity wanted to meet him and spend time with him. And they all told their stories. Ooh, I spent 2 minutes with the guy. Yeah, you don't get a lot of people saying that about other stars. But you have people that went out of their way, huge stars, that just got the biggest kick out of spending 5 minutes with Prince, and they would tell that story on a show. That was a highlight for them. And yeah, it was Prince. Hello.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's just, how can you not tell a story? How can you not want to write a book about Prince when you see what he did and what he did affected you that much? So and with you guys, how can you not want to interview people that worked with him? Same kind of thing. How can you not want to do a Merry Princemas every year?
There it is.
Because he was so good.
Amen.
Yeah. By the way, I'll be paying attention to Princemas. You got something planned?
I'm not sure what we got yet, but we definitely will be celebrating. And okay. I think this is going to be part of maybe a Princemas Eve. Maybe we'll set something up for you.
What? Ho, 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 ho. That's exciting. That's great.
Well, we appreciate your time, and I suppose we better let you go. We've been on here for a while, but again, the book is great, and I would say anyone out there who has any sort of fandom for Prince, you probably need this book, because it's definitely probably the best Prince book I've read. So I appreciate you making us just a teeny part of it.
Thank you very much. Can you do me a favor? Tell me, say a page number between 1 and 400. I just want to see what's on that page. Just a random page number.
276.
I was going to say
276? What's on 276? Let's see what's on 276. 276. When Doves Cry. Excellent choice. March 7th, 1984. When Doves Cry. So there you are. That's beautiful. Just a random page.
Excellent.
That's beautiful.
Give me one more random page, just out of curiosity.
326.
Oh, 326. Yeah, let's see. 326. A song called Susanna's Pajamas he did for the family, but it was originally called Maserati on Friday, June 22nd, 1984.
Wow.
Yeah, there's you never know what you're going to find in there. And that's kind of the fun thing. It's each page has a different stories and different dates in the studio. So again, the book is called Prince and the Purple Rain Era Studio Sessions, 1983-1984. I have a Facebook group, by the way. If you want to go there, it's Prince the Complete Studio Sessions book series. I also have a website, Duane Tudahl, DuaneTudahl.com, and you can download the first chapter if you want, and you'll get a 30% off coupon to order the book through the publisher. That's something else. Look for me on Facebook, Duane Tudahl. Say hi. I'm always in the Facebook group. We got about 5,100 members, but we're always talking about the book, and people are posting pictures of them holding the book and things like that. So please, if you're listening to this and you like this subject matter, look us up, because we want to expand this. So thank you. Thank you very much for the time, guys.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you, and hopefully we can talk to you again with the next one.
And Merry Princemas.
All right, Merry Princemas. Thanks so much.
Talk to you guys later.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.